We cover local and international news with a special focus on letters to the editor in local newspapers, articles in local newspapers, and even statements from local and international individuals such as politicians and clergy. We're here to offer our unique perspectives in a very large marketplace of ideas, and we welcome feedback and listener questions. You can email Vacula, that's letter J, V as in Victor, ACULA, at NEPAFreethought.org. And if you are local, we invite you, whether you are religious or not, to visit our website, meetup.com/NEPA-freethought, and to RSVP for events posted on our website. Today, in addition to commenting on various stories that we have, we're going to talk about the NEPA Freethought Society and spend some time introducing the members of this podcast. And today's discussion is going to be about morality from a secular perspective. The NEPA Freethought Society is a secular discussion and activist group that is a coalition of atheists, agnostics, secular humanists, skeptics, and rationalists predicated on support and community located in the northeastern Pennsylvania region. The group meets to discuss any pertinent issues, defend the rights of the secular where appropriate, and to enjoy each other's company. The group's mission statement is fourfold: social, educational, activism, and philosophical. The social aim is to establish a vibrant freethought community that provides fellowship and social enrichment. The educational aim is to establish a public and societal community outreach and dialogue to refute the common myths about atheists and freethinkers, including moral stigma surrounding atheists and freethinkers. The activism aim is to serve as a watchdog group, support system, and advocate on behalf of atheists and freethinkers who are victimized by discrimination, and to oppose church-state violations. The philosophical aim is to challenge religious truth claims by way of philosophical scrutiny, to promote a worldview of naturalism and rationalism, and to champion principles of logic, critical thinking, and the scientific method over those of faith, divine revelation, and mysticism. Our group has regular meetups twice a month. Our Drinking Skeptically event on the second Friday of every month at 7 p.m. at Rodano's in downtown Wilkes-Barre, and the last Saturday of every month for our monthly meeting at Rodano's. In addition, events are added to our calendar, such as cookouts, special speaker appearances, private buffet dinners, charity events, community events, and other special events. In December of 2009, the NEPA Freethought Society filed a complaint against Luzerne County in Pennsylvania to remove an unconstitutional religious holiday display from the lawn of the county courthouse. The NEPA Freethought Society, after a flurry of hate from local residents, college students, and some persons from the military, included threats and hate mail, calls for expulsion from college for me, and loss of financial aid, after-death threats, and especially a radio DJ who called me the third most hated person in Luzerne County for challenging the display. We were successful, and an inclusive secular display was erected. The NEPA Freethought Society members have also mobilized and rallied together with residents of the community and other community groups to counter the Westboro Baptist Church, who threatened to protest the funeral of a fallen soldier. We also debated anti-gay protesters at NEPA Pride Fest in Wilkes-Barre, ensuring that the protesters were distracted and waylaid from harassing festival goers. We also attend an annual benefit walk by SAFE, supporting autism and families everywhere, in addition to having SAFE as our primary charity. So, other members of the podcast, I'd like to introduce Rodney to the group. Rodney is the organizer of the NEPA Freethought Society.
Hi everybody, how you doing out there? My name is Rodney Collins. I consider myself to be an atheist by title, and I started the NEPA Freethought Society about 4 years ago when I was looking for a secular organization for myself to join in my area and found that there were none. So after some time of hashing it back and forth, I finally decided to give it a go and start an organization locally, and came up with NEPA Freethought Society. At this point, as Justin just explained, we're doing multiple things and trying to get bigger and better at what we do.
And Steve.
Yeah, I've been with Rodney in this group for 3.5 years, give or take. I joined the group to find others that share my same secular beliefs. That's why I'm an active member of the group. I want others with my secular atheist worldview to know that there's many people just like them.
So, Steve, what do you think are the main benefits of a group like ours being in the community?
Well, like you said, social, educational. I think it's important that people can come out and share their experiences with other like-minded individuals. I think it's important to let non-theists and theists both know about our group so that they could, if they're non-theist, they could become part of it. Or if they are theist, they understand that there shouldn't be any negative stigma to us. I mean, we are people just like everybody else, and we're no less moral than any other group of people. We are just as ethical, and we're good people just like everybody else.
That seems to be a common problem with theists believing, for whatever the reasons are, that we're no good because we disagree with them. And it's not the case at all. The bottom line is how you treat someone, regardless of what you believe in. And that's where we come in, attempting to spread this message that doesn't matter if you want to be this or per denomination or that denomination or non-denomination. It's all about you treat people, be respectful of how people live their lives. This organization, NEPA Freethought Society, is the only organization of its type in our area. So the first time it's being offered in our area to the local people who are non-religious. So we're around for the first time offering an avenue or a way out from the norm, which was never offered before. So at this point, like I said before, we're trying to get more and more people involved, let more people know about us, that we're here and what we're trying to accomplish. And so far, we're not doing too bad.
All right. I think it's very important to have a group like ours. Many atheists think, well, what's the reason for coming out? Why should we go to meetings like this? Well, there are a lot of reasons. The activism component is very important. And there are a lot of people out there who simply don't want to follow the law, who want to infringe upon our rights. And I think there needs to be a response to that. A lot of people aren't willing to come out, and that's quite unfortunate. So for those who can come out, I think it's important for our voice to be heard by the community and for there to be a group for like-minded thinkers to meet up. Now, Rodney, you offer a unique perspective because you are an African American and you come from a little bit of a Black Baptist church background. So what would you have to say to the listeners about that?
Once again, there's a lot of misconception going on when it comes to Black Baptist Church, which I attended when I was a child. So I pretty much saw and heard what goes on behind the scenes in the Black Baptist Church. And as a child, I didn't really get it. I felt as though it was, to me, it just didn't click. The people that I was around know most of my life, and I never had a problem with anybody. But when it came to this specific area of religious belief, I couldn't agree with it. I thought it was phony. I thought that the rules and regulations were phony, if you will. And personally, I can't adhere to a belief system that pretty much people are sitting there looking at each other saying it's true, it's real, but they have no evidence or proof or any test or question or anything of that type whatsoever. They never did anything like that. They're just more than willing to just accept what they've heard and been taught over the years and run with it. Given the fact that the African-American community in my area is smaller, the African-Americans in my community, I know most of them who go to local churches, which is like 2 churches, African-American churches, and since they've heard that I'm an atheist or I've divulged that fact, there's been some backlash towards me as well, and a little vitriol. But the bottom line is now that they know, and I have no problem with expressing that, I'm explaining things to them that they never heard before. This is new to them. And I guess to them, I'm like a alien, sort of. Something completely different or new they never seen or encountered. And at times, they don't know how to accept me, I would say, because of the way they act towards me. But I'm working on trying to establish better relationships with these folks and give them better understanding about what we're about. And there's no need for any backlash or vitriol. We should all be able to get along.
So an important idea that I often bring up is a separation from persons and beliefs. A lot of people, when you'd want to challenge them or even consider an alternate perspective or do a show like this, a lot of people would be quite offended because of that. They say, oh, you're offending my beliefs and you're being disrespectful. And it's a very strange thing that people say. So I want to move to Steve on this. A lot of people say, well, atheists believe in nothing. What does atheism have to offer? What is this, all this critical thinking? What benefits do you think there are, Steve, to critical thinking?
Well, critical thinking, I mean, you're not believing in something for no reason. It gives you a clarity. It allows you to see the world for what it is. You know, there's no problems that could be solved by praying to a god or any other deity. Religion oftentimes puts unreasonable guilt or demands on people that doesn't need to be there without any proof that there is a deity of any sort.
I think it's important to hold justified beliefs because there are very practical benefits like Steve said, in addition to simply not being conned, to having a good quality of life, it's simple that our beliefs inform our actions. And while people might not act on their beliefs all the time, well, it's very practical to be questioning, to be skeptical, and to challenge that which is established and what people take often for granted. For me, I'm the co-organizer of the group. I'm also the spokesperson and a board member. I write for Examiner.com as the Scranton Atheism Examiner and blog at JustinVacula.com, mainly about philosophy, atheism, and theism. Also featured in Chapter 2 of the book Nepatized, that's Nepatized, by author Kenny Luck, titled The Luzerne County Christmas Display Incident. I was on 2 episodes of Reapso Radio, an atheist radio show from California, and recently was invited to give a speech for a 9/11 remembrance event in Harrisburg, hosted by the group PA Nonbelievers. And last week, I was invited to attend a roundtable discussion of local bloggers that happened in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I received a degree in philosophy, and I also received a degree in psychology with a minor in professional writing from King's College. So I tend to come at these issues with philosophy. So that's very important. That leads us into our next topic, the topic of the day, which is morality. And there's a common myth that atheists can't have morals, or for some people, they say that you have to steal from Christian morality. And we question this idea of Christian morality or any type of religious morality. So, Rodney, what would you have to say about getting morals from a secular perspective?
Well, given the fact I've debated and had many discussions with theists over the years, and they've mentioned the morality issue, and then we've had that discussion. A book that advocates slavery and misogyny and things of that nature, and rape and murder, I don't find to be a good moral book to read when it comes to that. Apparently, the book is ancient, comes from another country at a time when people didn't understand what was going on around them. This was passed along, obviously, century to century. Some people refuse to let that type of thinking go. When it comes to morality, I don't think you need a book to tell you what's moral and what isn't. If your life's experiences should tell you and show you these things, you should know what's bad and what's right and what's wrong and what harms folks and what doesn't, and what people enjoy. So regardless of what you want to believe in or people believe in, the bottom line should still be treat other people decently and kind, and try to help people if you can, and try to lessen harm in the world. That would be a true morality. But when theists say that they get their morality from the Bible, I find it to be repulsive. And actually, I don't really believe they get the morality from the Bible, because they don't do the things the Bible tells them to do. So I believe that's just them just saying that because it sounds good to them.
Well, when they talk about getting morality from the Bible, I think it's pretty clear that we bring our morality to the book. Because if people were to read the passages about slavery, about stoning, whatever happens to be in the Old Testament today, they're going to say, oh, well, that's repulsive. And they start saying things like, oh, that was different back then, or that was indentured servitude. It wasn't too bad. You know,
they didn't study anything if they made a comment what they said wasn't too bad or it was different back then, because the Bible is very clear, very explicit when it comes to the rules and regulations that God supposedly handed down to man for owning other human beings. And I can't figure how it is someone could say it's a good thing to own another human. That's a moral thing. I wouldn't care what book they read, but if you could use your own head and think for yourself and know that there's such a thing as human suffering, you would know that no one wants you to own them and dictate to them what to do and how to live and so on and so forth. So when it comes to that, I'd say they're completely wrong when it comes to that specific issue.
I also feel that morality comes from your personal values. You decide what is best for your life and how it affects other people.
So then what if the Christian chimes in and says, well, what if we have the torturer going around who decides that it's great for him to go out and kidnap people and lock them in the basement?
But at the same time, that benefits no one else. You're still infringing upon other people. But we determine our morality from what is good for everybody.
Yeah, a good baseline is a term that's often ill-defined, but well-being, where you look at what benefits society, what benefits individuals. We can look at two different options in many cases where, well, what's a good program to get children to read? Shall we send them to kindergarten, or shall we torture them until they can read? And I think the option is quite obvious there. it might get a bit fuzzy because there can be several competing explanations and answers on how to arrive at a justified action. But a lot of good answers can be a good thing. We can have different methods and different approaches to how we get things done.
Well, apparently, atheists must have morals because we're not on the news every night, specifically atheists running around looting and burning and maiming and killing and raping and things of that nature. So if there was some type of surge in that when it came to atheists or non-believers, period, that might be kind of go along with what they claim we are, but that's not what we are. It would seem to me that the minute a theist believes or realizes that a person doesn't need the Bible to have morals, they can't understand that. They can't understand how it is you can't adhere to the same beliefs they have and still treat people decently. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing to understand. There's nothing hard about figuring it out at all. It's pretty much innate. It's in us to act like that. Of course, there's people out there who don't act like that, but that's not the norm. People just don't run around doing harmful things every chance they get because they know there's consequences behind that.
And I feel oftentimes people will use whatever religious text that they adhere to justify their actions.
So what happens many times with the religious books is the person either can't recall a reason or they don't know exactly how to explain an action. And they'll say after the fact that, oh, look, this book or this verse said that this was a good action. But we don't even need to consult the verse because we can get to morality without ever invoking a deity, anything supernatural, or any kind of dogma. I mean, you could look at moral philosophy and see the progress that we've made over quite a long time. We've had a lot of disagreement, and that's a good thing. We can compare some ethical theories, but when you want to talk about ethical theories, you often, in religion, you get to what is called divine command theory, where people say that if a god compels someone to do something or advises someone to do something, then it must be good, because God is all good. But that doesn't really work, because you can say, well, what if God were to command torture? Would that be a good action? And obviously that can't be the case. So what ends up happening for the theist or whomever else is they would have to say, well, God only commands that which is good. But that really doesn't work because that admits that there's a standard outside of God. Because if God made something good, then God can simply make torture good, but torture cannot be said to be objectively good. So the theists get into a big problem there. And this issue was brought up in one of Plato's dialogues, the Euthyphro. And Socrates was going to the courts, and he saw a man who he thought must know what morality is, because he was bringing charges against his father. And Socrates roughly said, well, you're bringing your father to court, so you must know what morality is. And eventually the discussion ends up where the man says, well, the gods know what is moral, so I'm just following the will of the gods. And Socrates roughly poses this dilemma. Is an action moral because God commands it, or is an action moral because it is endorsed by God? And if it's moral because God commands it, then we fall into the divine command theory again. And that obviously doesn't work. So the only other option has to be that there must be some external standard. So we don't even need to consider God when talking about morality. We can simply cut the middleman.
One of the issues I have when it comes to theists is their knowledge of the word that they're supposed to already know. They obviously have no problems coming to people they believe are non-theists or people they're not sure about, asking them what they believe in or don't believe in. But when you turn around and ask them about what it is they believe in, then it turns into something different. I don't believe the average theist actually studies what it is they're supposed to study. I believe they did study it thoroughly, that they might have a different take on what it says, rather than just listening to a pastor or a priest tell them what to think or what to do every Sunday, and leaving church or wherever they might go with a good feeling because they were around people like themselves who treated them okay, and they got a sermon that really didn't consist of anything other than happy feelings and we believe in this and we believe in that. But once again, there's never any questioning, any testing, anything of that nature. So when it comes to us, once again, atheists or whatever your title might be, whatever you consider yourself, they either don't understand us or they claim they don't understand us. Like you said before, the nativity scene incident that you were directly involved in, Justin, people had a lot of backlash and vitriol because of that. As far as I'm concerned, they didn't understand what was going on, or they didn't really care to understand. They were just irate at the fact someone came in with something different other than their normal standard belief system and how things have been going for years on end. that just disrupted them.
Yeah, someone said if the Constitution is that serious, then we just ought to get rid of it. People have actually admitted that they didn't care about the law. They just wanted the nativity up there.
And one person, I believe, attempted to say that the courthouse itself was Catholic or something.
That was the man from the military. He said the courthouse's religion is Catholic.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of misunderstanding going on, and like I said before, when it comes to actual discussion or debate, I find on many, many occasions that the theists I'm talking to or debating don't have any knowledge of what they should have knowledge of. And I believe if they did have knowledge of it, they might have a different take on what it is they claim they believe in and what I should believe in. Like I said, if a person decides they want to give somebody advice, at least another adult advice, I believe they should at least be able to come at them with something realistic rather than here's what I believe and I have no explanation, no proof, no nothing, but I want you to act this way because I think it's great.
Yeah, well, Christopher Hitchens was on the Sean Hannity show a while back discussing God Is Not Great, his book. And at one point in the discussion, Christopher Hitchens said to Sean Hannity, "You strike me as a man who never read the arguments from the opposite side." And I feel that way sometimes when I get in conversations with some theists. Their first argument would be something like Pascal's wager. What if you're wrong? Which is a really terrible argument, and I won't really get into that now. A former pastor of mine, actually, I started a conversation with him, and he was trying to say, well, I have faith just like you have faith. You have faith that George Washington existed. You were never there when George Washington existed.
That's a form of a cop-out. You weren't there. Well, we're not at the scene of a crime when someone's murdered a lot of times, but we can bring in investigators, and they can do their work, put in the work to find out what actually happened and who was responsible for the murder. That's science pretty much right there. If somebody wants to just say, well, I believe something because someone told me that I should believe it, and I don't need anything other than that to believe it, I personally really would have to say that person is gullible. That's what I would say about that person. If they don't put any thought into something, especially when it comes to something of this nature, supernatural, and the claims that you want to try and make it to a heaven. If you can't, you'll make it to hell. Things of that nature. So we're talking about some very high stakes here. And the minute I'll ask a theist some questions based on what they've told me about their beliefs, usually I get mumbo jumbo or double talk, or sometimes they get irate, tell me I'm crazy or want to just let the whole conversation go. So that's kind of telling when it comes to someone who claims they know something about how things started and how things are ran when it comes to this world. But talk is cheap once again.
And I think that George Washington argument is very weak in that George Washington was a person. I mean, even if we would make up a George Washington, it would be believable in that he's not a supernatural being that created everything out of nothingness. Whereas George Washington, I mean, there is evidence that we have a presidency. We have a lineage of presidents, one after another.
Yeah, there's no real reason to doubt that George Washington existed,
Yes.
I would wager. So what they're doing there is it's a fallacy, an informal logical fallacy called equivocation, where you use a term and two different definitions for two different contexts. So when he's saying faith in a supernatural context, that's a lot different than me having faith in George Washington. I don't have faith in George Washington. I have good reason. If I would have to invoke faith, why would I bother doing that? And why even have faith at all for these religious believers if there were reasons in the first place? I mean, I'm not claiming absolute certainty on anything. I'm saying I should believe that which is reasonable, which has good reason, that I can articulate and defend my position.
Some people believe that faith is good for anything, obviously.
But they're obviously compartmentalizing, because if I were to go to their door and try to sell them a magic diet pill to make them lose 100 pounds, or even 10 pounds, or
They
5
would
pounds.
probably buy it.
Oh, you think they would buy it?
I would
don't
think
know.
they would.
How about shooting lasers out of my eyes? I'll tell you I can shoot lasers out of my eyes.
They may ask for proof.
Yeah, then they would, right?
Well, if somebody comes to my door telling me they have a vacuum cleaner to sell me, it's state of the art, latest, best, greatest vacuum cleaner out there, and they give me the whole spiel, give me their pitch. And then when they're done giving me their pitch, and it sounded great, I asked a few direct questions about the vacuum cleaner. And then all of a sudden, it goes from a fluid pitch to, I don't know. I can't. I have no idea. Maybe you should.
You have to ask my manager.
Yeah. Then you'd ask the president of the corporation or this, that, and the other. I wouldn't buy that vacuum cleaner because it would seem fraudulent to me, which is pretty much the case when somebody makes a supernatural claim, which is above and beyond a vacuum cleaner. more likely than somebody saying that this God exists, and if you don't behave a certain way or live a certain way, you're going to suffer and be sorry for it. So there's a huge difference between the comparisons being made by theists. Some of it's pretty much just ridiculous comparisons they make. Some things are evident. Things that are evident, death is evident. People die, and theists know that people die, but I guess some way, somehow they might fear death. I think that some people fear death and believe that if that's the case, that they're going to they can go to heaven or hell. They better prepare themselves by, if not acting good, pretending to be good. Because there's too many cases I see folks saying they're good, I'm Christian, but behind the scenes they're acting a whole nother way.
So do you think then that people believe in this stuff because they fear the alternative? Maybe they don't want to believe that after this life is over, there is nothing there?
Some, I believe that some are definitely fearful of the unknown. They love life, and they don't want life to end, I would assume. But if someone tells them that, well, there's another place you'll go, that it will be forever, it's eternal, and there'll be no more suffering, no more dying, no more bills, things of that nature. It's going to be just one big part. It's going to be wonderful and great for eternity, and there'll be a boss there that you'll be serving. I guess if they want to adhere to that, because they think that that's the next best thing they can come up with when it comes to, well, what's going to happen when I die. But that's, as far as I'm concerned, it's not realistic. Nothing shows us that you're going to die and then go somewhere else, be revived or whatever. It's just, as far as I'm concerned, it's just pretty childish. It's silly. I understand fear. Fear is a real thing, but to the point where it makes you start doing and saying ridiculous things, it's gone a little bit too far.
And that's why I think it's important to be active and talk about these issues, because your beliefs can harm other people. A lot of these beliefs, even for quote-unquote moderate theists, it could impact your voting. You might not even realize what happens. But regardless of your actions, I think the truth is important. It's important to hold justified beliefs, and I would wager that a society that holds the most would do best, rather than one that uses superstition, supernatural beliefs that are unjustified. And Michael Shermer, we were talking about why believe. Well, it's an assumption that people have, and they come up with the intellectual reasons or the non-intellectual reasons later on to justify that belief. You talk about very smart people like Francis Collins, who converted after seeing a tripartite waterfall. So he saw 3 different parts of the waterfall, and he thought that was the Holy Spirit or the Trinity or something. I'm sure there's a lot more going on there, but this is what he described in his book.
Once again, that's one man's version of what he believes in. He saw a triple waterfall, and to him that meant something. I don't know what he saw when he looked around and saw poverty and death and all sorts of violence going on in the world. I don't know if that struck a chord with him or not, rather than looking at waterfalls that looked pretty or whatever it was that struck him. But there's plenty around us going on we can look at that is very explanatory. We don't have to make up stuff.
And I don't understand why a God would choose such obscure ways to communicate. Why would you place the 3 trinities in a waterfall when you could directly communicate with anybody you want? Why would you choose such a cryptic message?
Yeah, it's kind of like the people who claim to be abducted by aliens. Apparently the aliens want to send us this big message, but yet they're going to these people who people won't believe. Or you have people like John Edward or Sylvia Brown, right? And they claim to have some kind of supernatural abilities, and some other supernatural realm exists. Well, if that were the case, why don't these powers, go into someone really believable so that this person can actually take a test and demonstrate that these abilities exist? So we were talking about disasters happening, and one recent disaster in our area, northeastern Pennsylvania and elsewhere on the East Coast, was tremendous amounts of flooding. And interestingly enough, and as expected, the religious of the area have had several responses to the flooding, and this brings us into our first news article. This was published in the Times Leader on September 12th, and the article is titled, "Evacuation Affects Masses at Catholic Churches. Bishop Requests Prayers for Flood Victims." The mandatory evacuation order affecting thousands of Wyoming Valley residents includes many priests and parishioners who have been forced to leave their rectories, churches, and homes in order to seek safety and shelter elsewhere. State, county, and city officials have implored citizens residing in affected areas to adhere to a mandatory evacuation order, recognizing that some churches in the Scranton Diocese remain under mandatory evacuation the opportunity for regularly scheduled masses to be celebrated this weekend may not be possible. Bishop Joseph C. Bambera has issued a letter to the faithful seeking God's blessing and protection and requesting prayers for all those affected by the flooding and those who are providing assistance. The bishop asks that his letter be read at all masses this weekend and that a special petition be included during the prayer for the faithful. So Bambera goes on to make this statement in his letter. For all those who are suffering because of the flood and the damage it has caused, I pray for God's continued protection and blessing over you. While we wait to see what the immediate future will bring, we grieve with those who face great loss. We yearn for respite and peace, and we pray to God for strength and courage. So the interesting question that comes up here is that if there's an all-loving God who exists, why would he send the flood in the first place? And what's this continued protection?
There is no continued protection. That's just a belief. Christians die just like anyone else. Christians are raped, robbed, murdered, kidnapped, and they lose their jobs, they lose children, spouses, so on and so forth, just like anyone else. There isn't any protection. That's just a belief, once again, part of the belief system. Bishop Bambera, to me, sounds very unrealistic, that he is just pushing his agenda and constantly telling the folks to believe and come to church and pray. And if prayer worked, the world would be a lot different if prayer actually worked. The world wouldn't be as it is if prayer worked and there was a being that heard prayers and would help you out in certain times because you prayed to this being. But the world pretty much works the way we expect it to work. Like I just explained, lots of folks that are supposed to be Christians, devout Christians, run into hard times, illness, and so on and so forth.
But rather, this is a world now without prayer and without a supernatural, all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing being. This world seems to be what you would expect.
And I would be curious about this continuous protection. What about the flood? I mean, wouldn't he have protected you from the flood? And some people may say that is a test. And that argument falls flat, too, because that is almost a childish game that he's playing. Like, let's see how much they are devoted to me. I mean, that seems juvenile.
Wouldn't he know anyway?
Yeah.
The problem of evil is, well, an all-loving being, all-powerful, exists, but yet things happen to humans. And natural evil is the big problem for them. I could imagine, Bambera talks about continued protection. If I were to get a security officer to follow me and, someone came up to me with a gun and the security officer just stood there and did nothing, and then I said, whoa, I'm going to get him back. I want his continued protection. Well, the protection was pretty bad to begin with, so I don't think he's really doing his job here. Well, obviously God is not a security officer. It's a different situation. You can get my point there.
I don't understand how the cognitive dissonance isn't apparent to these people. It's apparent, like I said, when you pray as hard as they might, and still things turn out the way they turn out, that doesn't work. Given that fact, I've heard a lot of people tell me who are theists say, well, I prayed for this and I got it. Things I usually hear them tell me they got were things that they were going to get regardless, that it works that way. Somebody says, I was up for a raise in my job. I've been there for several years. I worked hard. So on. If they like me at the job, I would assume you might have a good chance of getting that. But if you're saying you relied on things you've gotten through prayer, that I don't believe. I have a relative of mine who told me that they received everything they own because of their God. They said that God gave them their home, vehicle, this, that, and the other. But I actually watched this person work hard for years on end and achieve what they got, from sweat and hard work. So I don't really see where all this God gives me stuff comes from, other than the fact that that's what they want it to be. Because we know in reality, you have to make things happen. If you sit back and do nothing, you get nothing. What you put in is what you get out. So all the belief in the world is not going to help somebody progress if their only plan is a God, or their only belief is a God, and God can help, and God will do this, and God will do that. It's like I said before, it's beyond gullible. It's harmful. And then you have folks who are constantly they refuse to take credit for things they've done. They might have done something good, help somebody else, but they'll always say, "Well, God was responsible for that." And when it comes to people doing good for other folks just because they can or want to, that's a great thing. But when you want to diminish that by saying, well, God told me to do it, or God showed me the way, what does that say about you as a human being if you're telling me that some invisible being that there's no proof of is the only reason that you're doing good things, people?
And they say that God usually helps those that help themselves, which kind of defeats the purpose of him coming along and helping you anyway, since you are taking the initiative yourself.
And how are you distinguishing his help from your own?
Correct.
That's another strange thing there.
It seems to me that apparently anyone can just say, I believe in this, I believe in that. And so when you can't prove that, and apparently there's lots of different denominations when it comes to religion. There's thousands of different sects of religious believers. But the bottom line is, once again, when it comes to them, what claim they believe and what they actually do in life are two totally different things. Totally different. A lot of times folks will say to me, I'm very religious, I'm devout, and they'll make this claim and tell me what is expected of them, and they'll turn right around and do the opposite. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't respect that, because that makes you a hypocrite. And I don't see anything good about a hypocrite or being in the company of hypocrites when they tell me, well, we stand on this firm, and then do the opposite as soon as they say we stand on this firm.
Yes, it's almost like they cherry pick which parts apply to them.
They do that.
And which parts they could ignore.
They do that.
Yeah.
I think that given the fact that we know they're cherry picking, I believe that they know what's good and what's bad without reading any book, the Bible. But given the fact that they want to adhere to that book and say this is their book, it's the good book, they're not going to go along with everything it says, because we have evolved and have better and better morals over time. We know what's harmful and what isn't harmful for the most part, and we've made changes. But given the fact that the theists will say the Bible is perfect, it's the infallible word of a God, nothing will change or shall change in that, that's a problem for them. That creates a serious dilemma for them. Because in today's modern society, we know that technology and information is pretty much runs the game, runs the world. Okay? Not prayer. Prayer doesn't keep us warm or keep us from being sick or cure us or catch anybody. Or stop somebody. Prevent somebody from doing something.
Father Jack Ryan from King's College disagrees, and he thinks that prayer actually did help people from the flood. And in an official message he put out through the King's College website at kings.edu, he says, I am grateful that our collective prayers were answered and that all King's students and employees were evacuated safely and that the campus was spared from any major damage. I ask all members of the King's family to keep in their thoughts those who suffered loss during this record flood. As we resume normal operations, I would be remiss not to express my gratitude at how quickly and effectively the college's employees and student members of the residence life staff acted when the evacuation was announced and in the following 3 days. I also want to thank, on behalf of the entire campus, the federal, state, county, and Wilkes-Barre city officials who admirably performed their vital functions during the flood. And he goes on, with God's grace, King's College has more than survived, and personally, I have a renewed enthusiasm for the importance of the King's College mission. Well, this is interesting because he's thanking God, and he's saying the prayers were answered, but he talks about how people did the actions and how people led to a conclusion that wasn't as bad.
And he's referring to the most recent flooding.
Yes.
So in 1972, in Wilkes-Barre, when Flood Agnes came through and wiped everything out downtown for sure, does that mean that no Christians were praying at that time?
I guess so. And this is also strange because King's College is an area kind of in the center of Wilkes-Barre, and it was less likely to be hit than others, although in 72 it was hit. But apparently the prayers were answered and King's College was protected, but what about the rest of the valley? Why couldn't the prayers just repel the entire flood? Unless, of course, he's just being metaphorical here and saying the prayers were answered, not physical, actual prayers. But it's still weird that God has to get credit when the people are the ones doing the work.
I mean, we had the president we had before last said that he was a fervent believer in God and that God protects our country and so on and so forth, George W. Bush. But we know that's not true. So we had terrorists fly jetliners into skyscrapers, killing thousands of people. And I'm sure that there were people that were in those towers and outside the towers who prayed plenty of times saying, please keep our family safe, keep this one safe, keep that family member safe. And for somebody to be able to just come in and fly planes into buildings like that, after all the prayer for safety in our country, that pretty much says that the prayer wasn't doing a daggone thing.
Did they specifically ask God to prevent jet airliners to fly into buildings? Did they specifically ask God to prevent that?
I guess they asked for our country.
They asked for our country because save the people in the country.
God bless America. Yeah.
You got to be more specific.
Oh, that's the way we do it. Well, this one writer in one of the letters to the editor on September 17th talks about the flooding, and he's given our answer here for the problem of evil, apparently. The letter is titled, "Writer Sees Disasters as Punishment for Sins." The letter says, and this person has 250 words to express what he wants to say here, and this is the exact text. God is punishing many sinful people with these disasters. A lot of women are getting abortions, people are not going to church, and many are sinning. This is a sign from God for people to wake up.
Well, that sounds like a holistic approach to me. I mean, that's like cutting off your arm because you have a hangnail. You know, it seems like he is being far too aggressive if he is punishing people and taking out innocence in his path. And that doesn't seem like a just God to me.
Yeah, don't you think he could just send down a hologram of a dancing Jesus or something, and maybe some people will see that and start waking up? But how do we know that all these things in the Bible, if this man apparently wants us, apparently going to church and sinning is going to cause natural disasters? So I suppose that our sinning changes laws of physics. I'm not too sure about that.
I don't know anything about any sinning. I know about physics. I don't know anything about sinning.
Well, I think I know a lot about sinning. I just won't call it that. I mean, it depends what... well, another writer says, book might hold insight into human suffering. We read about third world starvation, earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, war, and other physical evils. People don't know where or on whom to place the blame. In light of the fact that several thousand people were evacuated from their homes in Luzerne County, ultimately frustration and stress will cause much anger because of the incomprehensible pain set upon them, rightfully so. It is difficult to separate the spiritual from the secular. They are intertwined when you read about these evil happenings, be they in Luzerne County or elsewhere in the world. I urge anyone who might feel this misplaced anger to read Where the Hell is God by Richard Leonard, S.J. Hopefully, the book will better explain why physical evil occurs, providing a deeper meaning of our human experience, by Ozzie Quinn in Scranton. Well, Ozzie, why couldn't you just list the reason? You're not saying what you believe. You're just saying, oh, hey, there's this book. Go read the book.
Yeah, that's an argument of where you try to force people to read so much that they can't argue against everything because they're too busy reading.
Yeah.
And then that's not about you need to express your perspective, and then we could have a discussion about what you believe and not what other people believe.
I would think that when it comes to believers, when there's a threat of, say, something like a flood about to happen, why are the believers clearing out? Why are they running off and taking higher ground and stuff like that?
Well, it's us who are sinning. That's the problem.
Yeah. Do they not believe that their God can protect them? Or what's that all about? Why are they running at all? Why would they pack up their stuff and put it anywhere on other floors? If the God can hear them through prayer, and certain theists have personal relationships with God, like I heard many of them claim, then why does they need to do the exact same thing we do when it comes to crisis and run for higher ground, a flood, or when they're ill, they go to a hospital for medical attention, scientific medical attention. Like I said, it's all the stuff you would expect rather than the hype that they feed you.
Well, clearly, I guess they would go to 2 Corinthians 1:4 and say, God, comfort us in our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them when they are in trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. So apparently, if other people comfort you when God, who is presumably responsible for natural disasters, that can make it better. What do you think about that?
Well, I can't. Nobody can comfort me when it comes. If I was a believer and someone told me, well, the reason, how do they usually put it? They usually put it and say God works in mysterious ways. That's usually what they try to come off with when things don't go according to plan. And nothing always goes according to plan for believers or non-believers. So that should be a telltale sign as well. Things are as they are. Things just are. If somebody wants to tell me that they prayed for something and it didn't happen, there's a reason for something not happening. But if you want to label it as God didn't want it to happen, that's naive in my opinion, and it's ridiculous. You're shirking off basically the responsibility of finding out what it really was. If there's a way you can repair that or straighten it out, change things different. There's a lot of change that can be done. But just saying, well, God didn't like it, or God didn't go for that, or God's not going to grant that, that's outlandish.
But they won't let us make the mysterious defense. I mean, God, who is presumably all-powerful and all good, could stop all evil and not even be inconvenienced. But if I were to see something bad happen and I had the capacity to stop it, and I'm not saying, oh, give to every charity, everything like that. I can't possibly do that. It's not reasonable for me. I'm not rich. I can't possibly do everything. I'm limited. I'm a human. Well, what if I saw a rape happening and I could stop the rape? I wouldn't be harmed. Everything I think would go well. I have the ability to stop the rapist, etc. And I just stood there. And afterwards, the person who was raped can come to me and say, well, why didn't you do anything? And I'll say, well, I work in mysterious ways. I don't think people would take that. And that's ridiculous. For me, I have limitations, everything. I could have stopped the rape, but God apparently has no limitations. So he could have stopped it. But that's, of course, moral evil. But what about things like natural disasters? If I had a button to stop earthquakes, you would expect me to push that button. If I had that button and didn't push it, I would be a monster for not stopping an earthquake. But God just lets it go. And even better yet, or worse, he puts it into the fabric of his universe. That God apparently created the universe. He's all good. But then we get a universe that contains earthquakes to randomly kill people, believers, non-believers, everyone. So I think a letter to the editor that was sent in on September 23rd can be something that we can be in agreement with. And this is a big shout out to Tommy Erpak, I hope I pronounced that right, from Mashopin, who wrote this letter. Don't blame flooding on some higher power. To Mr. Alex Partika, who claims that all these disasters are punishment by his God for the sins of God's people. There is no God. Nobody is perfect. Everyone has sinned, as you would call it, Mr. Partika. To assume that you know what some supposed higher power has planned for the people of this beautiful and amazing planet is arrogance and ignorance beyond belief, which is staggering in this day and age. I would word it differently, but that was a nice letter. Very refreshing to see that in the paper.
Well, I think he did nail it in that it is arrogant to presume that you would know what an all-knowing, all-powerful being would think. I mean, I understand that you read the Bible, or I would assume that Mr. Topeka read the Bible. But to speak on behalf of God and say this is why these things are happening is completely unjustified. He has no ground to stand.
How does he access that information? Not only how he's claiming that this certain God exists, but that a specific God exists, and the specific God's plan is known, which is really strange.
I have to agree with that. Like you said before, anybody can claim anything. People who are non-theists make claims, doesn't mean that it's going to turn out to be true. But there's plenty of strange stuff going on when it comes. We
need reason, argument, and evidence. And this letter to the editor hopefully will resonate among the readers, because this is more in the skeptical area, and it might anger some. And I welcome emails if it does, of course. This is titled "Iran's Leader: 2 planes couldn't bring towers down." Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says that as an engineer, he's sure the Twin Towers were not brought down by jetliners. Ahmadinejad, in an interview with the Associated Press, says it would have been impossible for 2 jetliners to bring down the towers simply by hitting them. He says some kind of planned explosion must have taken place. Ahmadinejad stopped short of saying the United States staged the disaster 10 years ago, but he says there are questions the world should resolve, and noted there are doubters in the United States as well.
I feel that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Granted,
Carl Sagan.
That is correct. I understand that he claims to be an engineer. I don't know what his background is, but does he have access to the buildings? Did he inspect them himself? I don't know this.
He was actually denied his request last year to visit the site of the collapse. So he hasn't been there last year, that's for sure.
So it could be a cover-up.
He's part of the conspiracy. Yeah. Or someone else is in on it. Or, it's strange.
That is an extreme claim. That is saying that the government not only knew about it, but there were enough people that knew about it to put it through, yet so few people that the evidence never got out there that it was an inside job.
Yeah.
And regardless of how the official story goes, if you could pick it apart, one piece here, one piece there, that just means that one piece is not valid. And, perhaps focus on that. But to say that, a part of the official story is wrong, therefore it was an inside job by the U.S. government.
Yeah, it simply doesn't follow.
A huge leap.
Right. And he starts off the article with an inappropriate appeal to authority, saying, oh, as an engineer, I say this. Well, what's your evidence? And is an engineer even qualified to really make this statement? If you're going to be talking about demolitions, the proper authority is demolition experts. And Steve, you brought up a good point. If one part of the explanation is wrong, it doesn't entail that it all falls apart. Creationists try to do the same thing where, oh, we're going to attack evolution, and if your one claim is wrong, then creationism must be true. And that's also, interestingly enough, a false dichotomy. Even if evolution isn't true, creationism doesn't win out. And even if the quote-unquote official story is false, conspiracy theories don't win out either. So that was quite an interesting article to see. And another was titled, Paranormal Investigators Take on Sweatland Homestead. And the Sweatland Homestead, for those of you who don't know, is a historical place in Wyoming. And the article talks about these ghost investigators from a group called NEPA Paranormal. This is what the article has to say. 12 people in Ghost Detectives t-shirts spent most of the night at the Sweatland with video equipment, marbles, electromagnetic sensors, and a device called an Ovilus, O-V-I-L-U-S, that is supposed to translate spirit voices into robotic speech. Janet Flack, a Historical Society board member and a believer in the paranormal, joined the group. After a tour of the building and setting up equipment for the TV show, the investigation began with a prayer and warnings not to sit on any antiques. Katie Christopher, NEPA Paranormal Case Manager and Customer Service Employee at Intermetro Industries, led the group in a prayer to St. Michael the Archangel. The traditional Catholic prayer asked God to, quote, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits. Christopher, 26, who has a new tattoo of a friendly ghost on her shoulder, said the group has not encountered evil, but wants to approach the spirit world with a right attitude. The article goes on. A building that old is a likely site for spirit activity, Christopher said. In the carriage house, a group set up a video camera that can record in the dark. The Ovilus and machines that are supposed to light up if a spirit approaches. The pitch dark makes it easier to concentrate, the article says. In slow, patient voices, they tried to make contact with deceased Sweatlands with questions and pleas. Is Caroline here? Caroline, where are there no pictures of you in this house? Can you make a noise? Make a loud noise. We mean you no harm. You've probably waited a long time to talk to people. Here is your chance.
As an atheist, well, let me clarify this. A lot of people don't understand. The definition of an atheist is someone who doesn't have any belief in any gods, but some atheists will take it further than that, where they don't have any beliefs in anything supernatural. So for me, I can't go along with any of those supernatural claims. They have the same rank as the God theories, supernatural beings of any type, shape, form, or fashion, as far as I'm concerned.
I feel that ghosts fall into the same category as a god, leprechaun, unicorns, whatever. They are all, until you demonstrate that they exist, I have no reason to believe that they do.
Yeah, they're having a lot of presuppositions here, and they're talking about how machines detect the ghosts. Well, how do we know that? What evidence do we have for that? They're praying to cast in hell Satan, and that's really strange there. The prayer is going to ward them from ghosts. I'm not even really sure ghosts are consistent with Catholic theology, but apparently they're just making up their own thing here. But this group claims to be scientific, and they say they take a scientific approach to the paranormal, which is clearly here pseudoscience. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into our podcast.